I'm Rachel Morgan, 32 years old, originally from Springfield, Illinois, now living in a quiet corner of Madison, Wisconsin. My life looks neat on paper. I manage logistics at a regional supply chain firm. I pay my bills on time. I keep a tidy apartment, and I remember everyone's birthdays, even the cousins who don't remember mine. In my family, I've always been the one who has it together, the one who doesn't need help, the one who shows up, steps in, and keeps the peace. No one ever wonders if I'm exhausted. No one thinks to ask if I'm happy. When my father slipped on the ice 2 winters ago, I was the one who drove 4 hours in silence to sit by his hospital bed, even though I had a deadline due the next morning. But they've always expected that from me, and I've always given it. Until now, my younger sister Kayla has always been the opposite. Charismatic, impulsive, adored. She drops jobs like winter coats, changes passions monthly, and somehow always lands softly, usually on someone else's safety net. For years, that someone was me. I paid her car insurance when she forgot, co-signed her student loan when she swore she'd pay it off herself, and even covered her first apartment deposit after her third roommate ghosted her. I never got the money back. I stopped expecting it. I told myself I was helping, doing what family does, but nothing prepared me for what happened 2 weeks ago. Kayla got engaged. She threw a massive dinner at a trendy restaurant, all candlelight and curated playlists. I showed up with a thoughtful gift and a genuine smile. I meant it. I was happy for her, genuinely. Until the very end of the night when she pulled me aside, handed me a glossy wedding brochure, and tapped the corner with her manicured finger. "That's your section," she said. I blinked. "The floral and decor, 18,000, I laughed, thinking it was a joke. But she wasn't smiling. She had already assigned my name to a portion of the budget. Not asked, not hinted, assigned. It wasn't even a discussion. Just an assumption that because I was single, childless, and relatively stable, I'd foot the bill. That my hard-earned savings were waiting to be repurposed for table linens and imported peonies. I told her I couldn't do that. Not just financially, it was the principle. I had already given so much. That's when she looked at me, eyes narrowed, in disgust, and said words I'll never forget. "You're just jealous." The phrase hit me harder than I expected. Jealous? Of what? The fiancé she barely knew 6 months ago? The wedding I wasn't consulted on but expected to finance? The sense of entitlement she wore like perfume? The room kept spinning long after she walked away. That night, I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel in the dark, wondering how years of sacrifice could be reduced to that word. Jealous. I wasn't jealous. I was exhausted, but no one seemed to care, and that was only the beginning. The days after that dinner felt like a haze, as if someone had dropped a sheet of cold glass between me and the rest of the world. Everything looked familiar, but distant. I went to work. I answered emails. I even smiled at the security guard downstairs like always. But inside, something had shifted, cracked just enough for light to come in and show the truth I'd been too busy to see. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Not with apologies or concern, but with follow-ups. From my mom, from my aunt, even from my cousin who hadn't spoken to me since 2020. All of them echoing the same quiet, venom-laced tone. "It's not that big a deal. Kayla's stressed. You can afford it. You're the only one who really can." There it was again. That same branding they had marked me with years ago. The responsible one. The reliable one. A compliment maybe once. Now it felt like a burden disguised in praise. What none of them said out loud, but made perfectly clear, was that the moment I began helping, I forfeited my right to ever say no. Because I had paid before, I was expected to pay again. Because I had stepped up, I could never step back. That wasn't kindness anymore. That was conscription. It wasn't just the money. It was how invisible I suddenly felt. No one asked why I hesitated. No one cared that I had other plans for that money, a travel fund I had been quietly building for years, hoping to take my first real vacation in over a decade. Paris, maybe. A writing retreat in Maine. Something just for me. I never spoke of it because I knew how it would sound. Indulgent. Selfish. Especially when Kayla needed peonies and a champagne fountain. So I stayed silent. At first. Then came the dinner at my parents' house, the unofficial family council. Kayla was there, of course, playing the part of the overwhelmed bride-to-be, tears in her voice, hands wringing a tissue she didn't really need. My mother hovered nearby, eyes full of disappointment, not toward Kayla, but toward me. And my father, who rarely involved himself in emotional matters, kept his gaze on his coffee mug like it was the only solid thing in the room. They didn't yell. They didn't accuse. But every word was carefully selected to drip with guilt. Family means sacrifice. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Don't ruin it for her. I sat through it like a guest at my own trial. They talked about me like I wasn't in the room. I was no longer their daughter or Kayla's sister. I was a resource, a solution to a budget problem, a walking, breathing emergency fund. The worst part wasn't what they said. It was what they didn't. Not once did anyone ask if I was okay, if I was struggling, if I had dreams of my own. The moment I hesitated, I became the villain. Selfish, cold, jealous. I walked home in the dark, not trusting myself to drive. The night air bit at my skin, but it was nothing compared to the chill I felt inside. The kind of cold that only comes when you realize the people you've spent your life protecting would never do the same for you. That night, I opened my journal. I didn't write much, just one sentence. When you always say yes, they forget it's a choice. And I knew then that choice had to end. The week after that dinner, I tried to go back to normal. I showed up to work early, stayed late, answered every email with a smiley face even when I felt like screaming. But something had fractured deep in me, something small and quiet, but impossible to ignore. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced myself. Not because I expected support, because I knew it would be another message wrapped in guilt, pressuring me into silence, into submission, into paying, and then it came. An email with the subject line, wedding budget, final breakdown. I didn't even want to open it, but curiosity mixed with dread and forced my fingers to tap. A neatly formatted PDF, complete, with floral borders and cheerful fonts. A list of vendors, prices, deadlines, a total 17,145 hours. And below it, in plain, unassuming text, was my name. Not a request, not a question. Just a line item, contributed by Laura, maid of honor, sister of the bride, $18,000. No warning, no discussion, no permission. I stared at that screen, heat rising from my chest to my ears. They had done it. Not just assumed I would help. They had written me into the story as if I had already said yes, as if my wallet belonged to them. I scrolled down. Deposits had already been made. To the florist, the venue, even the photographer. I checked the timestamps 2 days ago, just before our family dinner. They had finalized the plan before I had even been asked, because they never planned to ask. That night, I called my bank, not to cancel anything. There was nothing tied to my accounts yet, but I wanted to make sure it stayed that way. I changed passwords, removed shared access, checked for any scheduled transfers. My stomach was a tight knot of betrayal and exhaustion. Not only was I being used, I was being erased. My agency, my boundaries, they didn't exist in this narrative. I was just the invisible pillar holding it all up. The next morning, Kayla posted a story on Instagram. Venue locked in. Couldn't have done it without my amazing big sis. I stared at the screen until the image blurred. The comments poured in. You're so lucky to have a sister like that. What a queen. Tell her I want to marry her for that kind of support. Support, is that what they called it? When you are emotionally cornered and financially pressured into playing fairy godmother for a woman who had never once remembered your birthday? I didn't respond. I didn't call. I didn't confront. I let the silence sit between us, heavy and deliberate. But inside, I was unraveling. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was a pattern, years in the making. The time I paid Mom's car insurance and never got a thank you. The time I loaned Kayla money for rent and she blocked me for 3 weeks. The time Dad told me, "You always land on your feet. as if that made me indestructible. At lunch that day, I opened my banking app and stared at my savings. Not the number itself, but what it represented. Hours of overtime, canceled vacations, quiet sacrifices. I remembered the shoes I didn't buy, the birthdays I spent working, the weekend classes I took to qualify for a better position. All of I. That reduced to a silent assumption. You'll pay because you always do. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by silence and candles, and I started making a list. Not of the wedding expenses, but of every time I had bent myself out of shape to help someone in that family. A tally not out of spite, but clarity. Because I needed to see it. To understand the story I was a part of, and how long I'd been. The one writing checks while they wrote the narrative. As I wrote, a strange calm settled in my chest. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't cruel. I had simply had enough. And if no one else would say it, I would say it to myself. You don't owe them your future just because they erased your past. Of all the things that hurt, it wasn't the money that stung the most. It was what they said to justify it. What they always said in different forms, with different tones, but the same message every time. You're the one who made it. You're the one who's doing well. You can afford it. That phrase, tossed so casually during one of our rare family brunches, looped in my mind like a cruel jingle. You've always been more successful than the rest of us. It's only fair to share. And that was it. No thank you. No recognition of sacrifice or boundaries. Just an assumed redistribution of my efforts, my time, my life. They didn't see the years of building, of breaking down, of waking up at 5 a.m. for work, only to take night classes at 8 p.m. to qualify for a better position. They saw a title, a number on a paycheck, a nice apartment and a car that didn't stall at stoplights. And in their eyes, that made me a resource, not a person. My sister's voice echoed in my memory as I walked home one evening from work, the sidewalk slick with early spring rain. She had said it over the phone in a tone that was almost sweet, like what she was suggesting was just basic decency. You always land on your feet. You don't even feel it when you help. But for me, it's the difference between surviving and drowning. She made me feel guilty for standing on solid ground. That was the trick, really. They never directly demanded. They wrapped it in flattery, in guilt, in phrases meant to sound like love. I was the strong one, the capable one, the responsible one. And in a family where roles are fixed and loyalty is currency, that meant I was the one who gave. Always, without complaint. Even when I tried to say no, to voice hesitation, the answer was always the same. That my no came from a place of privilege, that I didn't understand what it meant to struggle. That I was too removed now, too comfortable. They never asked why I lived in a smaller apartment even though I could afford more, why I still budgeted every grocery list, why I hadn't gone on vacation in 2 years. Because that would ruin the narrative. They needed me to be rich, not just in money, but in ease, in peace, in comfort, because it justified taking from me. If I had more, I should give more. End of story. I sat at my kitchen table late that night, staring at a message my mother had sent. Just a single line. We raised you better than this. And that was it. Not about Kayla's wedding, not about the cost, not even about me directly. Just a line meant to pierce, to prod at the deepest parts of my identity. The dutiful daughter, the loyal sister, the one who doesn't make things harder than they already are, I wanted to scream. Because how do you explain to your own mother that success doesn't erase exhaustion? That having a job, a home, and a working car doesn't mean your soul can be sliced into pieces and handed out like cake? How do you tell your sister that success didn't fall into your lap? That it came at the cost of birthdays missed, relationships sacrificed, nights alone with frozen dinners and textbooks? How do you explain that even though you can give, that doesn't mean you must? But they didn't want explanations. They wanted results. A wire transfer. A signature. A silent agreement to keep pretending this was normal. That week, I started doing something I hadn't done in years. I tracked my emotions in a journal. Not just what I was feeling, but when I felt the pressure shift. I circled patterns in my mind like a detective at a crime scene. The birthdays they forgot, the favors they remembered when convenient, the texts that started with, "Hey, hope you're well," and ended in dollar signs. It was a slow, painful realization, but I had to face it. I wasn't a daughter or a sister in their eyes anymore. I was the fixer, the rescuer, the account they could dip into when life didn't go to plan. But this time, I was changing the plan. I was rewriting the rules. I wasn't going to burn myself down just to keep their version of family warm. They had built a story where I was always the one who gave. And now, the story was about to change. The day of the wedding arrived like a distant storm I had tried to ignore until it was already overhead. I hadn't RSVP'd. I hadn't confirmed a seat. But I had seen the invoices, the guest list, the spreadsheet where my name appeared under financial contributor, but not under family. It was a strange, hollow thing, to be the one who kept the boat from sinking and yet be the last to be handed a life jacket. I didn't want to go, but some part of me, stubborn or wounded, or still hopeful, needed to see it. Needed to confirm with my own eyes that I was truly as invisible as they made me feel. I arrived at the venue dressed simply, in a navy dress I had worn to a work function months ago. Nothing flashy. I wasn't here to make a statement, I just needed to see it, to witness what my silence had built for everyone else. The venue was breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers dripped light across the marble floors. Tall vases spilled over with white roses and eucalyptus, the scent thick and sugary in the air. Tables were perfectly set, gold-trimmed menus folded neatly over linen napkins. It was the kind of wedding you see on magazine covers, the kind of wedding that costs $18,000. I walked in quietly, scanning the tables for my name. None of the ushers knew who I was. One asked if I was with the catering staff. I didn't correct him. I just kept walking, hoping that somewhere, tucked between bride's college friends and family friends of groom, I'd find a card that bore my name, but there wasn't one. I circled the reception area 3 times. I read every place card. I scanned every list. I wasn't on it. I wasn't even considered. And it hit me in a slow, cold wave. I had funded a party I wasn't invited to. My contribution had built the floor beneath the celebration, paid for the petals that lined the aisle, the imported wine, the monogrammed napkins, and yet I was nothing more than a ghost in the room, unseen, unaccounted for. My mother passed by me once, arm-linked with an aunt, smiling at someone across the room. She didn't stop. She didn't say anything. Maybe she didn't even see me. Kayla was radiant. Her dress sparkled with every movement. Her laughter carried across the room like a hymn. People toasted to her beauty, her joy, her future. And as I stood there near the bar, not even offered a glass of champagne, I realized that this wasn't a wedding. It was a performance, a curated fantasy. And I had bought the set pieces. Even worse, I hadn't just paid for the decorations. I had paid for my own erasure. At some point, I found myself standing by the restroom corridor, phone in hand, trying to breathe through the tightness in my chest. A server passed with a tray of appetizers, didn't offer me any. I wanted to laugh, or cry, or scream. But instead, I just stood there, frozen in the quiet realization that no one here had intended to include me. Not really, because to include me would be to acknowledge me. And to acknowledge me would be to confront what they had taken and how little they had given in return. It was never about forgetting a seat. It was about deliberately not reserving one, not making space for someone who had always been the space maker. I left before the cake was cut. No one noticed. No one called after me. I walked back to my car, heels clicking against the pavement, the sound sharp and angry in the still evening air. I sat behind the wheel, staring at my own reflection in the windshield, and I felt something inside me fracture, not like a clean break, but like a slow, deep cracking of something that had once held everything together, the kind of break that doesn't scream. It whispers. And in that whisper, I heard the truth I had been too afraid to face. I wasn't family anymore. I was a function. I wasn't loved. I was useful. And once I stopped being useful, or once I questioned the terms, I was pushed to the edges quietly and cleanly. The wedding was beautiful, and I was the invisible architect, but now I was done building. That night, after leaving the wedding I had unknowingly funded, I went home and sat in silence. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't take off my shoes. I just stood in the center of my apartment, the soft hum of the fridge filling the space around me, and I let the truth settle in the room like dust. I wasn't mourning their betrayal anymore. I was mourning the version of myself who had allowed it for so long. It's strange how quickly clarity arrives when you stop trying to pretend you're okay. For years, I had been the steady hand, the financial fallback, the one who kept my mouth shut so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. Every sacrifice I made was met with quiet entitlement. Every time I gave, they took it as confirmation that I always would. But now, standing in the apartment I paid for with my own exhausted bones, I knew something had shifted. The silence they offered in return for everything I gave. It wasn't peace. It was a muzzle, and I wasn't going to wear it anymore. The next morning, I started small. I canceled the auto transfers to Mom's account. I deleted the shared folder where Kayla used to send me invoices for her emergencies. I blocked Nathan's number because I didn't need another casual, "Can you just help me out this one last time?" message. And then I sat at my desk and wrote an email. Not dramatic, not cruel, just honest. I explained that from now on, I would no longer be financially involved in family affairs. That I wished them well, but I would not be their invisible safety net anymore. No one responded, at least not directly. A few days later, my mother posted a vague message online about how families should never keep score. Kayla shared a quote about how some people will never be happy for others. Nathan liked both posts but didn't say a word. None of them mentioned my name, but I felt the message in every passive-aggressive syllable. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. Because for the first time I realized I didn't owe them an explanation. I wasn't rejecting them. I was reclaiming myself. Every dollar I gave had come with a silence I was forced to swallow. Every time I paid someone's overdue bill, I buried another part of myself just to keep their world spinning. But they never noticed. And maybe they never would. Because I was only visible to them when I was useful. My boundaries didn't matter. My burnout didn't matter. My no didn't count. Only my yes held weight. Only my money gave me a seat at the table. And even that seat was on loan. They thought I'd always be there. Always saying yes. Always showing up. Always sacrificing my peace so they didn't have to feel a moment of discomfort. But not anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. Done explaining. Done rescuing. Done being quiet so they could feel big. Done pretending that family was unconditional when the only condition they cared about was my usefulness. Weeks passed, and the silence stretched wider. But it no longer felt heavy. It felt like space. Space I had finally claimed for myself. I started doing things I hadn't had energy for in years. I took long walks without checking my phone every 5 minutes. I signed up for a cooking class and actually showed up. I invited people over who didn't expect anything from me but conversation and laughter. And then something unexpected happened. One evening, after months of stillness, I received a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. She told me she saw the wedding photos and had wondered why I wasn't there. I didn't go into detail, but I shared a simple truth. Sometimes, being left out is the first step toward healing. She didn't push for more. She just said, "I'm proud of you." It was the first time in a long time that someone saw me, not for what I gave, but for who I was. That's when it hit me. All those years, I thought I was preserving peace by keeping quiet, by paying up, by absorbing every slight and pretending it didn't sting. But I wasn't preserving peace. I was sponsoring their silence. I was funding the illusion that everything was fine, that I was fine, that their behavior didn't cost me anything. And the moment I stopped, the moment I pulled the plug, the illusion cracked. They could call me selfish, ungrateful, cold. But I knew the truth. The real selfishness was expecting one person to carry the weight of a family and call it love. The real ingratitude was erasing my needs while asking for more. And the real coldness? It was in the way they all watched me burn out and didn't even offer water, just asked for another flame. Now I choose who I give my warmth to. I choose who I let in. I no longer fund the silence that once kept me small. I am not their sponsor anymore. I am my own beginning.